Step by step in disassembling some unit.
Step 1. Unplugging. Unplug every cable that is connected to the computer, wear a grounding strap, or touch an unpainted metal part off the computer to discharge any static electricity. Step 2. Remove the casing. After your computer is unplugged, Movado a clean working space, preferably edible. First of all, take the black casing off the PB, sliding it towards the front side. Then place the case at the side as you don't need it anymore. Step 3. Remove the power supply. The power supply manages all the power for the computer. The power supply supplies power to every component in a computer. Therefore, it has the most wires out of every other component in the computer. The first thing you do is unplug every wire coming from the power supply. Step 4. Remove CD or DVD drive. This one of the easiest components to remove. Just push the gray metal and pull out the drive. If you don't have a second drive, there should be a flat piece of metal covering the drive slot. Step 5. Remove system fan. Most computers have two fans, the system fan, the one blowing air into the computer, and the CPU fan, the one blowing air onto CPU heatsink. The system fan is located at the back side of the computer, the side with all the component plugins. First, unplug the fan from the motherboard. You can find the plug by following the wire from the fan. It should be labeled size fan 1. Next, you will have to unscrew the fan from the outside. You should now be able to lift the fan out of the PC. Keep the screws or bolt aside in a bag so when you assembling it back, it will be easier. Step 6. Remove CPU fan. The CPU fan is located right on top of the heatsink, which is a large piece of metal with fins on the top. The CPU fan plugs into the motherboard, which is hard to access. But just follow the wires and you should easily find it. Step 7. Hard drive and floppy disk. Remove the metal casing on the top side of the PC. Remove the hard drive and floppy disk combo from the computer. Then, remove each. Keep the screws or bolt aside in a bag so when you assembling it back, it will be easier. Step 8. Remove the power switch. To remove the button, you will need to push it from the back, the side with the wires. For clarification, see the pictures. Step 9. Remove RAM random access memory. A RAM is the memory or information storage in a computer that is used to store any programs and data for the programs. So, the more RAM you have, the faster your computer runs. Most computers have 4 or 2 RAM slots. To remove the RAM, push down on both tabs holding the RAM in place, which are relocated at both ends of the RAM. Step 10. Remove CPU. Remove the CPU by working the lever handle with care. Step 11. Remove heat sinker. Take out the heat sink through the lever handle with care. Step 12. Remove the motherboard. The motherboard is the mother of the computer. The motherboard links every component in the computer together. The CPU, RAM, and expansion cards are attached directly to it, and every other part of the computer is in one way or another attached to it. The motherboard has 7 screws holding it to the frame, which are indicated by large white circles around them. Remove those 7, then lift the motherboard out of the frame. Keep the screws or bolt aside in a bag so when you assembling it back, it will be easier. Step 13. Done. These are all the components that are disassembled from the PC. Step by step in assembling system unit. How to assemble system unit? This set of instructions will help you assemble a basic computer capable of running most modern software packages encountered by a casual user. Modern computers become more affordable when users supplement their monetary investment with a few hours of effort. This computer build will be very basic and will be the minimum hardware necessary to have a functional system. After you have all of the parts and materials needed, it will take between 2 and 4 hours to assemble your computer, and you will need to be able to use simple hand tools, such as a screwdriver and a pair of pliers. Step 1. Procuring parts. First, you will need to buy the parts necessary to build the computer. The parts we will use in this project are 1. Processor CPU 2. Computer case 3. Optical drive DVD-ROM and SATA capable 4. Memory RAM 5. Power supply 6. SATA cables 7. Motherboard SATA capable 8. Processor fan 9. Case fan 10. hard drive SATA capable. Step 2. Gather tools and supplies. Gather the tools you will need for the project. 1. Screwdriver for slotted and Phillips head screws. 2. Wire cutters and strippers. 3. Needle-nosed pliers. 4. Utility knife. 5. Small flashlight. 6. Adjustable wrench. 7. Small container to hold screws. 8. Heat sink compound. 9. Grounding strap. You may not use every single one of these tools in every installation, but it is best to have all of them on hand in case you have a use for them. Warning: using incorrect tools for a task such as turning a screw with a knife blade can cause equipment damage and bodily injury. Step 3. Open the case. Open the computer case by removing the side panels. Find the screws that hold the side panels in place and remove them. Warning: case may have sharp edges. Handle with care to avoid injury. Step 4. Prepare the case for assembly. 3 things need to be done before assembly begins. 1. Remove any parts or packaging materials that may have been shipped inside the case. 2. Remove the cover for the optical drive. On our case, we will be removing the cover on the highest drive bay to mount our DVD drive. 3. Make note of the cables pre-installed in the case. These should be front panel connections for features such as the power switch, audio jacks, and USB ports. Step 5. Ground yourself. Put the grounding strap on your wrist and connect the other end to the computer case. If your strap is not equipped with a clip to hook to the case, find a place to wedge against the metal. This will prevent any buildup of static electricity on your body from damaging the computer components. Caution: static electricity can ruin computer components. Always wear a grounding strap when handling any internal components. Step 6. Install motherboard. To install the motherboard, we need parts that should have been included with your purchased components. 1. EI or O bezel is a trim panel installed in the back of the case that surrounds the interface ports on the motherboard. It should be included with the motherboard. Caution: to prevent damage to the motherboard, it must only contact the standoffs and screws. All of the standoffs and screws must be installed. Step 7. Install hard drive. The hard drive is the device that stores all of your data. It is 3.5 wide and needs to be mounted so that you can gain access to the cable connections on the back. If that is not possible, you may need to connect cables before you install the drive. To mount the drive: 1. Find a 3.5 drive bay to install the drive in. If you have trouble finding a place to mount the drive, consult your case documentation for suggestions. 2. Slide the drive into place until the screw holes on the sides are lined up with the holes in the case. 3. Install the screws. Step 8. Install optical drive. The optical drive is 5.25 wide and is installed in the drive bay that we removed the cover from in a previous step. Cable access considerations apply to this drive also. To install the drive: 1. Slide the drive into the drive bay until the screw holes are lined up and the front of the drive is flush with the front of the case. 2. Install the screws. Step 9. Install the CPU. The CPU is the brain of the computer. It is installed on the motherboard in the socket. To install the CPU: 1. Find the corner marking that designates pin 1 of the CPU. On this AMD brand processor, the corner is marked with an arrow. Consult the manufacturer's documentation for specific information about your processor. 2. Lift the small metal rod next to the socket. 3. Find the corresponding marking on the CPU socket and insert the CPU so that the markings are lined up. 4. Push the rod down to lock the processor in place. Step 10. Install RAM. The RAM is the temporary memory location that the processor works from. Permanently stored data is pulled from disks and stored in RAM while the processor works with it. The memory is easy to install. 1. Set the RAM board in the socket as shown in Figure 22. Check to see that the notch in the board is in the correct location. If it is not, turn it around 180. 2. Press firmly on both ends of the board to set it into the socket. Make sure the tabs lock into place. Caution: pressing the boards in when the tab is not aligned could cause damage to the RAM boards as well as the motherboard. Step 11. Install the CPU fan. The CPU fan is really a combination of a heatsink and fan together. The unit draws heat away from the CPU. To install the fan: 1. Place thermal compound to the CPU following the instructions provided with the compound. 2. Set the fan assembly on the CPU with mounting tabs aligned. 3. Pull the locking rod down on the fan assembly to lock into place. 4. Connect the fan assembly's power connector to the motherboard. Consult the manual to determine proper placement. Caution: failure to apply thermal compound will result in insufficient cooling and will cause damage to the CPU and/or motherboard. Step 12. Install case fan. The case fan is usually installed on the back panel of the case. If the fan mount is not obvious, consult the case documentation. To mount the fan. 1. Align the mounting holes by holding the fan to the mounting pad on the inside of the case as shown in Figure 25. The fan needs to be mounted so that it blows air out of the case. 2. Insert the screws from the outside of the case and tighten. Step 13. Install power supply. Consult your case documentation for details and then follow these directions to install the power supply. Align the mounting holes in the case and power supply as shown in Figure 26. Insert screws and tighten. Step 14. Connect cables. With all of the components installed in the case, the jungle of wires can be daunting. It is important to consult the motherboard manual in order to make sure proper connections are made. There are two kinds of connections: power and data. Every device that has been installed needs power. The motherboard has two power connections, and there are two connectors specifically for SATA devices drives. The other connectors will run fans and other non-SATA devices. Data cables connect drives and front panel devices to the motherboard. Please consult the motherboard documentation for the exact placement of connectors. Warning: incorrect connections can damage components and cause bodily injury. Step 15. Wrap up. Now that the components are completely installed, the last thing to do is to reinstall the side panels on the case. The computer is now ready to be turned on and to have software loaded on it. If the computer has problems starting up, check all component connections and mounting to make sure that you have hooked everything up correctly. Consult individual component manuals for specific troubleshooting information if problems persist.